Well, it appears Clinton's campaign, meanwhile, may have been caught off guard the night that news, in fact, broke that Clinton used a private email server while Secretary of State. That's according to a leaked message from 2015. In it, campaign chairman John Podesta wrote, and I quote, "Did you have any idea of the depth of this story?" end quote. And campaign manager Robbie Mook replied, quote, "Nope. We brought up the existence of emails in research this summer, but we're told that everything was taken care of," end quote. So how much then will this have an impact on what voters do in 11 days? To discuss that, CBS News Elections Director Anthony Savanto joins us now. And Anthony, again, 10 million plus votes already cast here. And early indicators from what we know of the voters, it would seem that Clinton has an early advantage there. But beginning with the morning's updates from the early vote, two battleground states, Colorado, Georgia, what can you tell us?
Yeah, we're looking at Colorado, where it does appear that Democrats are turning out in a little bit higher numbers than Republicans so far. This is the first time Colorado is all by mail. So it's hard to do, you don't do necessarily apples to apples comparisons to recent years, but so far what's in the bank already looks like a little more registered Democrats. But here's the thing I always say, this is registration. It's a nice clue, it's a fun clue to dig through, but just because you're registered as a party doesn't mean you vote that way. So it's one indicator.
Okay, fair.
And then the other one I just looked at was Georgia.
Yeah.
And one of the keys to Georgia is, and it's been recently added to our battleground list this summer, because it looked like, even though it's been reliably Republican, Hillary Clinton could make a push there. The polling's been tight. Well, if she's going to, she needs big turnout from the African-American vote there. It's got to be around 30%. And so far, that's what it's tracking at in the early vote, with 30%. So, look, of the African-American voters out there, only 15% of them have cast a ballot so far, so they're not all yet in the bank. But if you're looking for something that says she's on pace, that's another clue.
I realize we're reading tea leaves, or perhaps like a tea leaf here at this point. But as it regards now what we're speaking of here, these daily dumps from WikiLeaks, and one that now people are calling perhaps the most damning yet here, the fact that Hillary Clinton perhaps hid her extensive use of a private email server from even those closest to her in the campaign. Are you seeing a tangible impact on the vote thus far?
You know, all year we've told the story repeatedly of those honest and trustworthy numbers, which for her have been low, low, low. Okay, I think context here, because some folks come back and they say, well, it's emails. Why does that matter? And from the polling, here's why voters are saying that it matters. And that is, it goes up to this larger narrative that in polling, voters told us from the start of the year, they feel like there are two systems out there in politics and in the economy, frankly. One for people who already have advantages and one for folks who don't. And it looks like they tell us that it speaks to that narrative, where there's one group of folks who can do what they think they want to do, and other regular folks, people tell us, that don't get to play by that set of rules. And I think it speaks to that narrative. And then you go through the polling, and they consistently say they don't feel like she's explained it well enough. And it sort of leaves that lingering, and then that's why I think we've consistently seen those honest and trustworthy numbers stay low.
And I'm interested here, likely Florida voters were asked the following question: which best describes how you feel about Hillary Clinton? A, email scandal is tip of iceberg, more troubling things to come. B, we already knew all there is to know about her past. Now, the first took 55% of the vote as opposed to 45% of the vote. And while I decide, what those numbers may mean, I'm also struck by the fact that those two ideas are not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not. And look, sometimes we draw this sort of arbitrary line at a majority, right? Oh, it's a majority, therefore that's what the public believes. It's not. It's mixed. And there is definitely a core of people, most of them Democrats, who feel and they say, move on. But the folks who are not voting for Hillary Clinton, or the folks who are on the fence about her, the question for them is whether this speaks to something that would continue going forward. So when you're choosing a president, you're looking at what's going to happen, because we can't predict everything out there. And that's where I think it's given in the polling numbers, given her a bit of a slower growth rate than she might have otherwise had.
And the idea of prediction, I'm almost struck just by what you do. That you do have this, obviously, this endless wealth of data to draw upon from elections past, but then there's also an element of your job which says you have to strike all of that and just focus on the present. And here's why. Iowa and Ohio both went blue in 2008, again in 2012. Now we're seeing Donald Trump in play in both states. If nothing else then, Since it all comes down to the Electoral College, what does it say about the shifting demographics and how they might inform what we'll see in 11 days?
Those are states where, particularly Iowa, where you see a larger number of non-college whites. And those are the same kind of folks who have told us they are struggling in today's economy. We know from the economic data that that's the case. When you get down south, you get to the Virginias and the North Carolinas of the world, and you see higher numbers of folks who are doing better economically, have college educations, and that's increasingly rewarded in today's economy, you feel less of a call for change. And so it's the folks who are calling for change that are more likely to be voting for Donald Trump. And I think when you see that map, to your point, it speaks to that larger change that's happening in the country and in the electorate, where some of those states in the upper Midwest aren't doing as well, or more people aren't doing as well economically.
I know your work days are 24 hours long at this point, so Anthony, we always appreciate a couple of minutes of time.
Look, I love this.
As do we. As do we. Lots of numbers.
It's all good.
Lots of numbers to parse. Anthony Salvanto, as always, we do appreciate it.
Thanks.